Will AI make killer robots or create scandalous, naughty deepfakes of you? On this episode of the AI Guys, we address fear, uncertainty, and doubt with AI and terminate those apocalyptic fears.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Leah Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by my big brain math guy, Rich Swire.
Good to be here.
How's it going today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and we're gonna be taking on FUD today. Which you have so eloquently broken down to fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it comes to AI. I think we've touched on it a little bit in previous episodes, and it's time to kind of peel back that layer and tell me if Terminator is actually coming or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think we see probably more often when we're talking to businesses, obviously. I mean, consumers are always pretend to be fearful. You know, you go on Twitter or whatever, your choice, X, Facebook, and they'll be like, oh, it's watching us. It's going to take our jobs. It's going to do all this other stuff. But the reality is like they said the same thing about social media
or cell phones in our pocket. Every time there's a piece of tech that's going to take.
But they just adopt the tech and give away all their information for free, and then they wake up 10 years later and they go, "Oh, I can't live without my TikTok," right? So, but I mean, sure, AI is like it has a similar tone, but I think it has a little bit more meat to it because Hollywood has, created this mindset in our eyes. There's so many visuals that come to when you think about AI because of all the great movies that have come out around, Terminator,
the post-apocalyptic storylines, and it's God forbid your car is taken over by something that can override you and all that kind of stuff.
And it's one of the challenges that we have today, even selling our product, in the sense that I think the fear is a little bit deeper and probably more justified in the sense of when you're deploying this, and the power behind some of the cool stuff that we're doing, it is really good at what it does. And so when you start, it's almost like and we'll talk about this with doubt, but I mean, it really makes you wonder like, oh man, this thing is really good. It's doing a really good job of answering that support ticket, or it's really doing a good job of qualifying this lead. I mean, and so that I think is jarring, which is kind of doesn't really make sense because you're like, oh, of course it's really good. You're like, this is awesome. It's exactly how I want it to work. But then you're like, well, wait a minute, how's that doing that? Right. And that's what it creates this black box effect is what I call it. So really a lot of the FUD in the business side is actually not really justified. It's really more about just not understanding how it works. So let's that's part of what I want to do with this episode. Let's dig a little deeper and talk about fear, So I think the biggest fear with what we see with generative AI and how it's being used today is really kind of twofold. One is, how do we, if this thing starts doing things we don't like, I'm not saying like Terminator, grab guns and start shooting down people in a mall, I'm talking more about like, what if it starts just, answering questions the wrong way or saying certain things that might rub people wrong, in a business sense, it might be off brand, or maybe it promises something. Like there's that famous story back in the day where a chatbot, agreed to sell a car for less than what it was worth because
it was like $1,000 or something like that.
I mean, these are kind of weird cases that are now not really a big issue because it's been solved. But I mean, in the early days, like any tech, it's going to do stupid things, right? So I think it's more about the fear of not being in control, because usually with software, you kind of control it because unless you do,
it's the reason you buy it. You're trying to gain control over some aspect of something.
Right. So the lack of control is probably what causes most of the fear. And I think but I always, when I'm talking, when we're both talking to, executives or leaders or business users at our customers, it's no different than if you hire a person. I mean,
exactly.
I've seen you on a bad day, and quite honestly, it's not something that I would be proud of,
I mean, most people don't even see me on good days.
Yeah,
so
if you don't have your chai tea latte, I mean, you're a beast, right? So, I mean, it's not too dissimilar to AI. You know, I mean, if an employee has a bad day, gets in a little bit of a ringer with a customer and says some negative things, you know, it reflects bad on the company, you know, for that moment in time. But I mean, AI is probably less likely to do that because it's always happy, right? But it is more likely to probably say something that might be, you know, technically wrong, right? But you just have to put it
or slightly outside of context.
Yeah, or just talk about something that you trained it on that might not be true anymore, right? So
Sure.
I think that fear is easily, quite honestly, minimized through.
Yeah.
I mean, not to self-promote with what we're doing, but you know, when we built out our platform, Rhea, you know, one of the core components was building out the training. You know, training AI is probably the most important component of making sure that you can minimize those outliers, those specific edge cases. Because if you're lazy or if you're just deploying some half-ass AI and you don't really train it, you don't give it the guardrails that you need to, of course it's going to say stupid things. It might even hallucinate. It might make up stuff because AI's really intent is to answer the question as best as it can. And so if you say,
and it wants to do that.
Exactly.
So if you haven't given it the tools to complete the task, it's going to want to still complete it it's no different than a human.
It's no different than a human, right? If you're talking to a sales guy and then you ask them a hard technical question, they have two choices. They're going to either say like, yeah, of course we do that. Yeah, that's a feature that's baked right in because they don't know the answer and they don't want to say no, right? Or they have the humility to say, honestly, I don't know that answer to that question, but I'll get back to you. And that's a simple.
Sales guys like to bullshit, Rich.
That's true.
I didn't think that.
Yeah. I know a couple.
So when I don't have my chai tea, you already put it on there.
You were reaching for it right there, weren't you? You were reaching for it.
I wish if there was one in here, I would be right on it.
But I think that's to kind of close the chapter on fear. The fear is that you don't know what it's going to say next. And the solution to solving that fear is better training and giving it guardrails. And taking control over it by using tools that allow you to do that, and not rushing to launch something without really training and testing it prior to going live. No different than an employee. You train your employees, you give them the documentation, the manuals, all that good stuff. It's no different. So
they can still go rogue. And the biggest thing that I've done when we've been talking to customers, whether it's larger enterprises that were like launching an internal pilot to bring them up to speed on what AI does, or a business that already knows like, hey, I'm not trying to gut my staff, but currently they're at capacity and I'm not in a position to go and hire 3, 4, 5 more bodies. Because we don't have the business for it, but we need it. That's really where AI kind of comes in. And I do think it does create fear at times because we as consumers or working in a specific job will say, oh God, am I essentially training my replacement? I think you see that too in corporate world where somebody, is in a position for a long period of time and there's someone moving through the ranks and it's like, hey, you're going to be under so-and-so. And they're going to kind of show you the ropes. And the guy's like, yeah, right. I'm going to show you the ropes. Right. He's going to come and take my job.
Yeah.
So you see that same kind of pushback, I think, with AI right now. But there's a difference between an employee and the business owner and where they see the application. Some employees have told us that, if this, takes 5 tasks off my plate a day, now I have 20% more bandwidth to do other things. That's great. And the business owner's like, I can reduce my OpEx cost by 40% because now I don't have to have offshore employees or I have to do these things. So there's a lot of fear that I think is justified in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of misconstrued because it is that unknown or that uncertainty. I think that really is what it plays into it.
That's an excellent point. I mean, that's a different kind of fear, right? It's the idea that maybe I am building something here that could make my job, less valuable. And I think it's way too early for anybody to kind of say, yes, that is the intent. Obviously cost savings, finding ways of generating more profit is always part of it.
Sure.
But also at the same time, if you're doing a reduction in force, if you're laying people off because you're just not hitting your profits, you also don't want to reduce, the service level agreements or the capacity to support your existing customers. Because you might let go of half your staff, you need to have a solution to still support the people 100%. Those people are supporting. So I think when I look at it that way, from a perspective of if I put my employee hat on and say I'm fearful this will take my job, even if that is a justified fear, because it's going to be different for every company, right? Every company has, some companies are hiring and also deploying AI. Some companies are firing and not doing anything with AI. So I think the way I would look at this is, here's an opportunity once, honestly, every few decades for you to redefine your role within your business. And it really doesn't matter. You could be a support tech. You could be a sales rep. You don't have to be technical. You don't even have to be an executive. But this is now the time to embrace, not to kind of just ignore it and fear it, but to basically say, I'm going to understand how this works, and I'm going to use it to my benefit, and I'm going to become the expert of AI. And I'll tell you why this is an achievable thing. Because if I was up here saying, here's, Spanish is becoming more and more popular language, so if you need to learn Spanish if you want to keep your job and compete in this marketplace. And then people are like, oh, I don't have the time, and energy to learn a new language. That's going to take me 6 months, 12 months. I'm not even good at that. I sucked at it in high school. And so you can make excuses, because I'm not asking people to learn something that's really outside the scope of everybody being able to learn it. When you're talking about AI, it's extremely approachable. Everybody knows how to use ChatGPT, and that's literally what I'm talking about. If you just understand and use the tools, understand how to prompt, understand how to use it to better your job and better the jobs around you, then you can actually put yourself in a very solid position on becoming, hey, listen, you're going to go to your boss or whoever, or if you're happen to be the boss, you're going to go to your team and say, hey guys, I've been playing around with this stuff. I think we could become 10 times more efficient. Allocate our time to bigger and better things, because, remember that project we couldn't do because we didn't have the time, or remember that new product we wanted to build but we didn't have the energy or the budget. Right. Now you're growing as a company, because I think everybody generally wants to grow, and not just, but you can't if you don't have profit. So what AI allows a company to do is take that pressure, reduce costs, because you can accelerate and use your resources more efficiently, and not have to expand your staff, but use your existing staff and get 30, 40, 50% more capacity, which is really the same as profit. Not many people think of a business that way, but I look at it that way all the time. I look at profit as not just, money, EBITDA, and what you're earning after all your costs, but I look at profit as like, if I can take one employee, give them a tool and technology to make them twice the ability, efficiency to output that much more work. That's no different than profit. Because I didn't have to hire somebody.
Their time has a cost associated, and it staggers down.
But so, these are both fears that are legitimate, and I think if you embrace it with a much more open mind, but I'm not saying rush into it, for sure. There should be a healthy amount of fear, and you should look for people. This is exactly why we got in the business of what we're doing, is we help companies kind of get over that hump of that initial fear and give them a little bit more control, a little bit more insight in what's going on, and a much more business ready approach to deploying AI.
Yeah, I think a lot of that uncertainty in the conversations that we have, both professional on what we're doing with Rhea and just, in terms of our network and who we talk to, I think a lot of that uncertainty just stems from the education on the topic. Like, we know enough about AI from our examples that we've gone through and some of the use cases that people experience through like ChatGPT. But when you do step back and kind of look at what that piece of AI is in the grand scheme of things, I mean, generative by itself is just one blip. Right now it's the biggest blip because it's the one we're all seeing. But like, then you get into AGI and you get into all these things, and people it's like when you talk to someone about the universe for the first time, like a kid, right? And they're just like, oh, so we live on Earth. And you're like, yeah, and there's these planets. Like my daughter right now, 4 years old, loves the solar system. We got her a telescope and she saw the moon for the first time up close. And you could just see her brain be like, oh my God. Like, that
when you realize it's three-dimensional.
Exactly. Yeah. So when we take a huge step back and we look at like this little sliver of where we're at right now and like what the potential is of everything, I think that kind of creates this anxiety for a lot of people of that uncertainty. And it's just like, oh God, where is this going? And how am I ever going to stay on top of it? I mean, that's also another application for AI to be like, hey, look, you've got a lot on your mind, man. Like, why don't you let AI take this off of your plate, because you need more time for your family, more time for your business, more time for yourself, whatever the case may be. So letting it play into that, I think, is is kind of the double-edged sword that a lot of people are running into.
Yeah.
You know, how much do I want to do and how much am I afraid to do?
Yeah. And uncertainty is kind of like the, you know, the sister of trust, right? Like trust is what is really at the center of a lot of this uncertainty. And it's unfortunate that most of the players that are really driving this new evolution of AI are, you know, they have a various levels of trust. And so like if you go down
track records are kind of all over the
so
place.
if you go down the line, you know, Facebook, you know, not really trustworthy, right? They just had to pay a massive fine to the government because they, you know, oh, well, we said we weren't going to use your data, but we did, or we said we were going to, you know.
Cambridge Analytica is still on the top of a lot of people's minds when it comes back to that.
And so then you go Google and you're like, okay, maybe they haven't necessarily violated our trust at the degree of like social media providers, but I kind of know that they're in the game of monetizing my traffic and they monetize
my
me.
info.
I'm their product. Yeah. And so I'm a little bit, you know, is this who we really want driving the future of what potentially could be, you know, the next, obviously 100 to 200 years of just dramatic change that we experience in the world. And, you know, from a commercial perspective, it feels a little unnerving. And then you have Microsoft, which probably I put them in the same category as Google, but at the same time, you know, they have a long history of doing some shady stuff. Obviously now they're different management, but still, you know, they're very much out to dominate and become a monopoly. And any of these monopolies make you nervous because, you know, it does, again, it ties back into fear, which is like, there's this one giant company that's going to have this very powerful AI and then it's going to control us. You know, it's the classic, you know, Terminator theme. And then you have newcomers like OpenAI, which quite honestly, you know, the first couple of years, you know, we've been working with OpenAI literally since the beginning. And, you know, the first couple of years, they were kind of very transparent. They were very much a research organization. I think it was brand agnostic, really. And they respond with this idea. I mean, based on the idea, they were kind of this quasi nonprofit. So they were kind of had this like, oh, okay, these guys are new. So they had the benefit of not having this ugly history that these other players have. Plus they don't have an ad network. They weren't looking to charge us for our time. They were just going to say, oh, if you want to use our premium service, you pay us, which is actually much easier for people to wrap their head around from a trust perspective.
Yeah.
But in the last 3-4 months, I would say they've almost like depleted a lot of that goodwill. You know, they had the shady incident where they kicked Sam off the board for a reason we don't really understand or know.
Like 72 hours later, he's back kind of a thing.
And I think the biggest problem is not that happened, but they never really disclosed why it happened. And so that feels a little shady, right? That doesn't, I don't think that's settled well with anybody. Because if they said, oh, hey, it was a misunderstanding, you know, Sam and so doesn't like each other, or the board, we realized the board was not really up to speed and wasn't able to really handle the big stuff that OpenAI was about to go through. They
took a jump too fast, whatever.
You know, there's always disagreement at a corporate level. They should have came out and just said, this is what happened and this is where the disagreement is, and let the public opinion fall where it falls, quite honestly. I mean, obviously Sam got the biggest boost. Everybody was like freaking out because Sam had so much goodwill.
Now he's the guy.
But now it's like, now I'm like, oh, now he's almost like undefeatable, right? Like even if there was a board in there and they wanted to get rid of Sam, they're now going to think 3 times, 4 times before they even begin to do it. Whereas,
take a shot.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're that far off of being in that camp of okay, well, let's see. And now they're, a few weeks ago when they launched 4.0, they, supposedly, stole Johansson's voice, which it's a reach, but still,
ScarJo.
I think they're a target now. And so now people feel like they can come at them for like unsavory business practices. But the reality is like,
the shine isn't there like it was before.
And
I get it.
Yeah. And now they're obviously heavy commercially focused. Whereas before they were more research. If you were to say OpenAI prior to ChatGPT, if you are to describe it, you would describe it as a bunch of scientists doing research, not sure what's going to happen. And then after ChatGPT, they got a taste of that money,
of that good money.
And now they're like, now they're driving around like they got the #1, rap album, right? And they're just like living the dream, doing music videos, right? So I think all of this uncertainty stems back to that trust. And unfortunately, in this world, we don't really have a center point to there's nowhere we can point to say, I trust that, right? Even government. I think I saw a poll recently that, who would you trust the most to manage the future of AI? And a majority of it went to open source movement, but then, in a close second was, existing commercial entities like Google and others, and government was like not even, it was really far, it was like last.
Yeah, below other kind of a thing.
So I think we're headed toward a similar situation where you look at the drug industry or you look at the food industry. And I think when we get to that point, I think it'll be a little bit of a it'll take a lot of the air out of the room in the sense of this uncertainty. So I think what's going to end up happening is all these major providers that are working toward AI will have to become very much like, if you're going to be FDA or SEC or any other government regulated entity, are going to probably have to get, when they release a product, when they actually publish a new version of their LLM or of their AI, there will be some sort of entity that's in the government that will, look at that, run some tests. Yeah. Just like the FAA comes in, kicks the tires on a plane, make sure it passes safety inspection, but they're not looking at how the plane is made. They're not interfering with the commercial aspect of innovation. But when before that plane puts people on it and takes off, they just want to check through a couple things. And I think that's where it's going to ultimately fall. And that's probably going to happen pretty soon, where, before ChatGPT or OpenAI or Microsoft or Google says, all right, we've got this kick-ass new model, and somebody in the government is going to say, all right, let's just go through it, make some tests. And it's probably going to, ironically, it'll probably be driven by AI. So they'll have AI monitoring AI and say, is this model safe? Is there anything here that we need to put guardrails on? Is there anything here that might cause issues around national security? And then at the end of the day, I think everybody will be like, oh, because nobody really worries about food anymore. They feel like they kind of trust the government to some degree to at least know that it's not poison. But I think we've also become very conscious of what we're eating and are making better decisions because we've been educated on health. I think the same thing will happen with this. I mean,
well, you touched on, those fears and uncertainties that we've outlined for the last 15, 20 minutes. That's what's leading to the doubts for, I think, certain people on when they want to jump in. Like you said, with corporations and maybe certain entities not always having the best interest in mind, it's tough to have them turn around and say, well, hey, you need this, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of where companies like ours that do operate in that middle layer kind of step in, because it's more so about understanding, look, are you even in a position where you need to have this yet? You might not be. So it's important to stay on top of it and stay educated, just like you kind of use the analogy with food. Not every single person needs to be a dietitian, but you do need to kind of know what you're putting in to, making sure that you're taking care of it the right way. Yeah. So
I think I've been in the software business for quite some time, have had numerous ventures, and most of them have been on the cutting edge, if not, pretty relevant to innovation curve, whether it be SaaS or whether it be telecom. And I've never really seen such a split audience when it comes to AI. I don't think anybody's really in the middle when it comes to doubt. Either they see it and they've experienced it, and there's absolutely zero doubt that this is going to change the world and this is going to change business as we know it.
Sure.
And of course they still have fear and uncertainty, but they are I know, whereas you could argue any other technology, let's say VR, right? Or Google glasses, or, self-driving cars, people are like, oh, I still, those, I don't think any of those things are going to change my life, or maybe I doubt I'll use that. I doubt I'll do this. Right. I don't think anybody really, you either really, really, truly, are a hater and a non-believer and believe it's all hype, which is a very unique type of viewpoint.
It's a very small portion now.
But they are super avid about it.
It's probably 50-50 36 months ago, I would say.
But today with one thing that ChatGPT just absolutely blew the doors wide open, and now Google is following suit. And now, with all the new cool stuff with video, people are just okay, now doubt has been okay, there's no doubt that we're moving forward, and we're moving forward fast, right? Where there might be shades of doubt is not necessarily that where we're headed, the direction we're headed, but what impact it would have on their business. Like the doubt around can this thing really do something within my business, a function, a task, or even a whole role, as well as or better than, or at least cost effective as a person, right? Because we're all human, we all have egos, and it's the famous saying where like somebody's like, they feel very secure in their job, and they're like, oh man, this company, it wouldn't survive if they didn't have me. I do this, I do this, I do this, and the next thing you know, they get fired, and then the company keeps going. It's like, wait, how are they possibly doing? And so companies have the ability, and people obviously too have the ability to adapt very quickly. And I think the doubt is really, you mentioned it earlier, which is an excellent point, which is just about education. I think once they see it working and understand how to implement it, and I'm really specifically talking about businesses, because consumers, it's more emotional when it comes to consumers than it is tactical. They're not really looking at to change their life. They're just kind of like making fun of it. They're focused more on whether it's woke or not. They're just
consumers are looking at this as a shift from MySpace to Facebook.
Yeah, they're kind of like,
it's not changing their world.
I asked it a question, it got it wrong. I'm gonna go post about it. When you're talking about business users, what you're really talking about is the one big question, right? If I put this AI in charge of X, let's say a support role or sales role or ops role, whatever it might be, will it able to do it? And can it do it as good as or better than what I currently do? And the only way to really prove that out, to solve that doubt, and I put this in the context of today. I don't think there's any doubt that it will be able to do this at some point, right? Like everybody goes, okay, we're on this massive curve. It's going to be able to do this in 1 month, 1 year, 10 years. I don't know, but it's definitely going to be. And we see hints of this, right? We saw it with the OpenAI's release of 4.0, where it's talking to somebody and you're like, oh man, no, it's coming, right? So it's coming faster than we think. But I think that doubt is shrinking to zero pretty fast. And now it's more about, how do I implement this? How do I get ahead of the curve? And if I do implement this, how fast do I need to jump the gun? Is my competitor ahead of me? Is this going to put me at a disadvantage competitively? And of course, that's another reason why we started our business, was to help companies look at this rationally and go, all right, this is how you start looking at automating and using AI in the best practices, but in parallel to what you're currently doing, and then doing kind of this transitionary period where you train it, it learns and it understands your business better. And so when you are ready to flip the switch, it's not this jarring, where it's like, oh, I'm going live, and then it fails to.
You've got a taste of it rather than just, like you said, jumping.
And it works in tandem with your current system. It only makes you stronger, and then you can start diverting your resources. We call it shadowing, right? Like it shadows your current team. It complements your current team. And then once it starts picking up what it needs to do and starts taking tasks and allowing for that team to delegate, then you start to see it really be optimized to actually do what you wanted to do in the first place, which is start taking those rudimentary, repetitive, somewhat, mechanical tasks away from your team, and your team can focus on the stuff that they should be focused on, which is the bigger picture stuff, the stuff that actually grows your company, drives new revenue, and they'll start to embrace AI as an assistant or as a complementary tool set versus this kind of thing that they're looking into a mirror.
Disruptive piece.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, we did it.
Yeah. We got through it.
FUD. We did. We beat FUD.
Call me Elmer Fudd.
Oh man.
We're hunting for wabbits.
God, it was so good. This was one of the better ones until my
Elmer Fudd joke.
I mean, first it was Homer Simpson. Now it's Elmer Fudd. So if you guys want to make sure to follow and subscribe for more content like that, it's definitely worth it. But we appreciate you guys all joining again, on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And as always, we appreciate you letting us be seriously stupid and hopefully a little surprisingly smart. Have a great day.
See you guys.
Ready to explore.